Hi everybody. As I mentioned last night in chatting with Andrew and Linda, it's completely laughable the way that guilters will resort to trying to insult truthers because they have no other means of trying to argue against the revelations that have been discovered since Making a Murderer first came out. To hurl personal insults at truthers, it just means that they have completely lost the argument, and this is their last resort to try and provoke a similar backlash from a truther is what they are trying to achieve, and it just doesn't work. Unfortunately, guilters, when it comes to me, I am far, far too thick-skinned. And as I've said many a time, no one has ever come anywhere close to being able to insult me the way that, for example, Erekozy has, and vice versa. But anyway, interesting, wasn't it? In the Confession Killer, the Volt, V-O-L-T, Victims of Lucas Tragedy, they were so incensed at the prospect of Lucas being taken off death row, of not being executed for the, I believe it was the Orange Socks murder, that that they actually got to the to affect the running for presidency of George Bush, who was then governor of Texas. A completely vigilante movement, which was completely misguided. They were the guilters back then. They believed Henry Lucas was completely guilty. He'd confessed, therefore he's guilty. And because they'd lost loved ones, they were actually insulted by the idea that the perpetrator of the crime was being allowed to avoid the death penalty. As it turned out, as I say, they were completely misguided. The same way as a lot of the guilters out there are at the moment. When it comes to, they accuse us of standing on her grave and insulting her memory. When it comes to insulting the memory of Teresa Halbach, there's absolutely no doubt who are responsible for that. So I've just done a little list, which you're free to add your own, I don't like to use the word favourites, but to add your own observations to the ones that I've listed here. Number one for me, the fact that, like Pinocchio, the state of Wisconsin have presented Teresa Halbach as being made of wood. To present that bullet as evidence, having put DNA from either the chapstick that they removed from her bedroom or some other substance that had her DNA on, possibly the vibrator, but most likely the chapstick, because we hear about the waxy substance on it. But the fact that there's wood embedded in this was the bullet that supposedly went through her skull, and it survived in a fairly intact shape, but it's got wood in it, and was found obviously 4 months later. To do that, to present that as a piece of evidence, is just completely shocking, isn't it? Number two, just as bad, the cremains, which are possible human, described by Ken Kratz and his experts as merely possible human, were handed back to the Halbach family. Very, very insulting to the family. Number three, no photographs were ever taken of the supposed final resting place of Teresa. We know of no photos. Whether any were taken, it doesn't seem likely. Maybe they were, and they're maybe being kept in Tom Fassbender's personal possession, But as far as we know, Ertl didn't take any photographs, Tom Sturdivant didn't take any photographs. Item number 4. Judge Patrick Willis deemed that the deletion of messages from Teresa's voicemails were of zero evidentiary value. Again, it just beggars belief that you would insult somebody's memory like that. Ken Kratz specifically tells us in the trailer to the forthcoming documentary by Sean Reck that he had no need for a coroner. What do? They just come in and kick the body and say they're dead. His use of language, I think even now he might be considering that to be very, very bad on his behalf. But the fact that they were not prepared to have Deborah Kakic come and examine the scene for the obvious reasons that she would just immediately blow the lid on what was going on. Item number 6. Neither Ryan Hillegas nor Scott Lodon, who had both been involved physically in a relationship with Teresa Halbach, so therefore statistically the most likely perpetrators amongst the white community, the statistics somewhere around about the 98-99%. Neither of those were ever even regarded as possible suspects or ever formally interviewed. As I say, I don't like the use of the word favourite because these are in terms of insults of a dead person. But number 7, her grieving brother stated that it may take days to get over the loss of his sister. And this was whilst Teresa was only a missing person. Item number 8, the mentally unstable judge, Angie Sukovich, often referred to as Judge Flowers, because she received some flowers from a cousin, a relative of Dennis Vogel, after one of her decisions. She believes that she is acting as a district attorney or an assistant district attorney when she should be acting as judge, and has denied all requests for the further testing of the evidence that was supposed to be preserved for Kathleen Zellner to test. And she has also denied an evidentiary hearing into the evidence discovered thus far, and despite there being an agreement between Kathleen Zellner and the Assistant Attorney General, Tom Fallon. You know, this trying to block any path to the truth. Again, just further insults the memory of Teresa Halbach. Now, I tweeted the first 9. I've then had some input from some of our great supporters, not least Fen from 80 More Things. Number 10. What a surprise. We are still waiting 14 years later for Andy Colburn to write his report about finding the RAV4 at the East Twin River, having been told exactly where it was by Kevin Ramlow. Again, it just insults the memory. It also insults the intelligence of everybody looking at this case, that Andrew Colburn thinks that is appropriate to do that, to avoid writing his report. Number 11, this beggars belief. Why would investigators need or have to take 7 pairs of underwear into evidence? What possible use would 7 pairs of Teresa's underwear be? It just beggars belief. Again, just insults, the fact that they're rummaging through, her private stuff like that. For what purpose? Number 11. Again, one that Fen pointed out to me. When they arrived at having found the RAV4 in the most bizarre circumstances possible, they didn't even bother to look inside to see if Teresa was in the RAV4. Because they knew perfectly well that she wasn't there, so what's the point of looking for her? But again, this just further insults the memory of Teresa. Number 13. There was never an investigation into who it was that was harassing her. We hear from the guy Pierce, of Pierce Photography, I forget his first name now, that she was receiving harassing phone calls. They, at the time of her disappearance, they were never looked into. When we add up all that as I say, I'm sure you've got some of your own that you can add to the list. But when we look at the list of things that they've done, probably the biggest insult to the memory of Teresa Halbach was that I don't think for one moment that Teresa Halbach was the kind of person that would want 2 innocent people being buried alive for having caused her disappearance when they hadn't. Perfectly innocent people. Which brings me on to, in effect, the final insult to Teresa, which is the fact that Manitowoc Sheriff's Department and District Attorneys Vogel and Kasurik, they had to stop their depositions. They had to put a stop to them. It was going so badly for them with the depositions that had already been taken. Steve was well on his way to securing the multi-million settlement. But it wasn't the money, it was the embarrassment. So they had to stop these depositions. But you cannot murder Steve. He's a hero. And for one thing, it would be far too obvious what was going on. So they had to hatch a plan in which Stephen Avery was taken care of, not through assassination, but through burying alive in the prison system. And it had to be a plan in which the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department and Vogel were in no way held responsible for the 85 wrongful conviction. We wait to find out exactly what happened. But it seems very, very possible that the greatest insult to Teresa was that they were quite prepared to use her, an innocent 25-year-old photographer, as a human sacrifice in order to put a stop to the way that Stephen Avery was embarrassing them. Anyway, that's my list. Please, as usual, add your own comments and add to that list. I'm sure there's many others that I have not thought about, not added. So please add your own. Just a quick reminder: later on today, this evening. That's Saturday morning for Tracy Keogh in Melbourne. I'll be going live with Tracy, who is, I would say, one of Brendan's, obviously one of his greatest supporters, but also somebody with plenty of, shall we say, inside knowledge on the efforts by Steve and Laura to get Brendan out of prison. So please join me then. We look forward to your company. Bye for now.